Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for joining us for the afternoon session of the 5th Annual Capital Access Convening. So on the agenda for this afternoon, we have this upcoming session, which is impact tracking, invaluable measures, CDFI impacts. And then we'll have a short 15-minute break, and then the next session after that begins at 1:45, and it's rebuilding our economy post-COVID-19. That'll again be followed by a short 15-minute break, and the third session starts at 3 o'clock, and it's the CDFI resiliency in the midst of a pandemic. After that, there will be another short break, and then we break out into our regional networking sessions. So for this session, I would like to introduce Sweetgrass Consulting. They will be the ones presenting this next part. And we have from Sweetgrass, we have Andrea. Andrea, since 2008, has been engaged in impact measurement and evaluation, community and market research, and strategic consulting. Much of her experience has been with nonprofit organizations working on a variety of projects ranging from developing and implementing full evaluations plans to specific research projects and community action planning and facilitation. Also from her team, we have Alyssa. Much of Alyssa's experience includes tracking outcomes based on organizational and community-defined goals, youth-based art and mentorship evaluation, comprehensive database and data collection development, and place-based market study. Also from Sweetgrass Consulting, we have Mary. Mary's experienced in building and managing databases for a multitude of projects and clients ranging from arts evaluations to community development, financial institutions, impact tracking, using software such as Microsoft Excel, Outcome Tracker, and Salesforce. Mary's main focus is organizing and making sense of data and creating reports that thoughtfully explain the impacts measured. So from there, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Andrea.
Good afternoon, everyone. Get my screen sharing up and going here real quick. And thank you for jumping on this afternoon. I know we all have busy lives, and definitely appreciate everyone coming to our session. So our session is called Invaluable Measures. It's about native CDFI impact. And so in the session, we'll be sharing data from a subset of native CDFIs, and this subset represents roughly 17% of the native CDFI industry. And these folks that we're sharing data from are members of the Opportunity Through Impact system. I'll talk a little bit about Otis, as we call it, in a little bit. But we'll share data that helps us to explore native CDFI outcomes such as wealth creation, bankability, economic self-sufficiency, financial wellness, and community connectedness. And please, as we go through the presentation, utilize the Q&A function or the chat box to ask questions throughout. Got multiple staff from Sweetgrass and Owista here to answer questions throughout the presentation. And at the end, we'll leave some time for questions as well. But we've got a lot of data to show, some really exciting things. So please feel free to use that Q&A throughout the presentation. Before we get too far into it, I just want to give a little bit of background for the folks who don't know who Sweetgrass is. We are a small consulting firm. We were established in 2014, and we focus on providing evaluation and research services to native CDFIs and native communities generally, as well as to sort of underserved and economically burdened communities. So we're an organization of 4 employees. We've got a combined experience of 30 years in monitoring and evaluation, qualitative and quantitative research, and community development and engagement. You can see on the slide here some of our core areas of services: market community studies, a lot of sort of needs assessment, market assessment, feasibility studies, and then that impact measurement and evaluation. And this is where this work comes in today, is in that effort. And so we do database creation and management, which is what kind of the core of Otis is. We do standardizing custom reports, pretty much exactly what we're presenting on today. So we do a good deal of that sort of impact measurement and evaluation, both on program sides and on organization-wide size. And then we also do organizational evaluation and strategic consulting. So we work on focus groups and meeting facilitation, trained technical assistance, workforce development. So we kind of work in a lot of different areas, a lot of different sort of industries, but one of our core set of clients is native CDFIs. And so that's where our sort of work with Otis is going. We've worked a lot with native CDFIs generally as well, doing larger impact measurement and evaluation efforts as well. So next, we want to just give a little bit of an overview of what Otis is, for those of you who don't know or have heard of Otis but don't know too much about it. Very simply, Otis is a data and impact tracking system, and it was designed specifically for native CDFIs, and that was done in partnership with Awisa and Sweetgrass Consulting. So Awisa and Sweetgrass Consulting, we both worked for almost 3 years to develop the Otis system, worked with a lot of native CDFIs in that process to streamline and define what Otis is, what it collects, what it does. Did a lot of that work for about 3 years, and we piloted the system as well with a group of native CDFIs. And I put up here on the slide 5 different impact goals is what we call them. And the idea here is that Otis tries to collect data from individual clients for native CDFIs to talk to these 5 impact goals. And of course, there's a lot that goes into each of these impact goals, and I could do a whole hour presentation just on Otis and what it collects. But this gives you a little bit of an overview of what we're trying to say something about with data from Otis. So things about 7th generation transformation, sovereignty, whole person wellness, individual empowerment, and wealth creation. So those are some of the core things, like I said, that we'll be talking about today. And the different data dashboards, as we call them, will be focused on these 5 impact goals. So you'll get a little bit of a better idea of the data that we'll be talking about under each of these impact goals as we continue on. And then a final sort of little piece of introduction around Otis is some of the participating members. And the slide is kind of busy, but it gives you a sense that there's 12 native CDFIs who have data that is included in the reporting that we're going to be talking about. You see some of their logos here. Generally speaking, what I wanted to highlight here is that, we're looking at data from a lot of different organizations focusing on different types of lending products in different areas of the country, different sizes, lots of sort of variety within the data set that we're looking at today. And we highlighted here specifically this types of loan products offered. So 100% of our folks offer business products. Some may not be doing them as much as other products, but 100% of them offer business loans. 83% offer consumer loans, about 1/3 offer home loans. And then we've got about 2/3 who have some sort of COVID or emergency product. And some of those are overlapping with consumer products that some folks already had an emergency product and we're looking and sort of rehash that to be a COVID related response. And then other of our Otis members actually instituted a new program within Otis for COVID response. And we will be highlighting some of that data to sort of show some of that response and some of the need that's out there as well. And finally, before we get into showing the actual data to you all, I just want to give a little bit of an overview. So we'll be showing 7 different Tableau dashboards. And I'll tell you what Tableau is in a second. So a Tableau dashboards, so 7 of them, we have a COVID and emergency. We'll talk about that first. And then we'll show demographics. And this is going to be specifically client demographics. And then we'll show those 5 impact areas. So we have a dashboard per impact area. So we'll be getting through all 7 of those dashboards, and that'll be the bulk of our presentation today. We'll be showing that actual data. A few notes that we have and some caveats that we have that I'd like to set the stage with in terms of the data that we're seeing. First is Tableau itself. So Tableau is an online sort of infographic and data visualization tool. And so what we ended up doing is we took raw data from Otis, we exported that, and then we brought it into the Tableau software and essentially made it more visually appealing. And so the thing that I want to point out here is that this Tableau, these dashboards are not natively available in Otis, but we brought them into Tableau because of their ability to have more functionality around filters, and they are a little bit more aesthetically pleasing than the reporting that we have natively within Otis. But all the data came directly from Otis, and we can do a lot of this analysis there, but it essentially looks nicer in Tableau. And for those of you who have used Tableau, it's a really awesome tool for visualizing data. So hopefully you're all excited about it as we are, and you'll see more obviously as we show you. Another is about time frame. I just want to be clear that all of the data that's presented for these dashboards, aside from the COVID dashboard, is from calendar year 2019. So January 1 through December 31st of 2019. So it's not from all time, it's just that sort of one snapshot of calendar year 2019. Another is around data validity, which is always something we have to sort of think about, and I like to put as a sort of caveat before we get into data is there's several layers of data validity with Otis. First is that we're getting data many times directly from clients themselves. So there's some degree of self-reporting error and validity issues that can come into that. And that's something that we always have to recognize, and something that we work with Otis groups to try to ensure that that data is as accurate as possible. That's one layer of potential error. Another with data validity is around the Otis data that we have available to us. So not all groups use every feature of Otis. Not all groups use every metric that we collect in Otis. And so depending on what those individual sites do and actually collect affects our ability to do some reporting in Otis. It's not something that I'm worried about with validity, but it's something I like to mention, and especially for any of the Otis agencies on the call, if we view a dashboard and you're like, well, I definitely closed more loans than that in 2019, then it's a pushing point for us to check. And for a lot of it, what it means is that data is not up to date in Otis. It's just like any other data system out there. What you put into is what you get out of it. And so that's just a thing we want to mention with data validity, that there are pieces of data that might be missing from this, and it might not be tracked in Otis. All we can have access to is what's directly in Otis. So being aware of that. One of the other pieces with that is talking about what I have here is applicants and recipients. So essentially what this means is that we track sort of two phases of clientele engagement in Otis. The first is sort of a pipeline, but is more around applications, right? And so that you could get, 1,000 applications for a holiday loan, but you might only close 200 of them, and those are your recipients. The data that we're showing in these dashboards is going to be for applicants. We have some sort of sticking points with that recipient process and being able to filter on that. And so what we've done for these reports is we've relied on that sort of applicant data. So you're getting a little bit more of like a market demand view and sort of potential pipeline view of some of this data. Still really very interesting. I wouldn't be surprised if this data was very similar if we were to get down to filter to recipients. But we lost too much data when we started to filter out to recipients. So we kept it as applicants to make this as effective as possible in sharing this data. The final piece of caveat is that really the data that here is selected data. All right, so the idea there is that this is not all of the data that we have in Otis. It's a very brief subset of specific data points that we felt highlighted the impact goals the best, and that we had some of the strongest information for. So most complete data that we have in Otis, the most responses that we have, things of that nature helped us define what specific data points or metrics, and really it's the answers to questions that we ended up using in these reports. So still a ton of data, but just know it's really the tip of the iceberg in terms of what we can show with Otis information. All right, so we're going to jump over to the dashboards themselves now, and I'll be handing it over to Alyssa to speak about the first dashboard, which is our COVID dashboard.
Great. Can everyone hear me? Okay. Andrea, you might want to zoom in just a little bit, at least on my screen, it looks a little smaller. So as mentioned, this first dashboard we're going to show here is related to the emergency programs that Otis agencies have implemented. As Andrea mentioned, in response to the COVID crisis, many Otis agencies were actually able to utilize their current and existing emergency loan or grant products. And others added new products and systems to really respond to this crisis in relation to, using grants and loans. So, we all know how innovative and how just absolutely stellar native CDFIs are. And during these trying times of uncertainty and anxiety, isolation, this of course was no different. So although the rest of this data is for the calendar year of 2019, as mentioned, we really wanted to highlight this really critical and supportive effort that Native CDFIs are working diligently to provide. So Native CDFIs really had to adjust and respond quickly, right? And we see the need is just huge. And the need is growing and growing. So in order to act quickly and diligently, systems needed to be created that were really streamlined and client-driven to ensure timely processing of applications. So with these systems in place, you can see here just these Native CDFIs that are featured here alone, which I believe was 7 just in this. So only 7 Native CDFIs, they've received more than 7,500 COVID support program applications for a total amount of almost $6 million in just the last 3 months. In fact, one notice agency actually received over 2,000 applications in the matter of a few hours when they first launched their emergency grant program. So crazy stuff. We all know how insane this timing is, but you all are responding in a really amazing way. So this dashboard just features the demand here, you know, the amounts that have been requested and so far what's been dispersed. And then we just highlight the types of hardships that are being experienced. Of course, as most of us know, most of that hardship is really due to employment layoff, but we also know that some people have had to really change, even if they weren't laid off, they've really had to, you know, reprioritize their own schedules and their own ways of living really to accommodate, you know, kids being at home or taking care of relatives. So we're noticing that type of thing as well. So with that, I'll just pass it back over to Andrea, and she's going to introduce us to some of the 2019 Otis data.
Great, thanks, Alyssa. Definitely some really awesome work done in a very short period of time for COVID. So to jump to some demographics, there's a few things that I want to sort of mention and show here around Tableau, which is some of the reasons why we use Tableau and we're excited about it. We've actually got some ways to interact with this data that's is a little bit more live. For example, in the map feature, sorry, it needs to reload real quick. But in the map feature, I'm actually able to select different states and have it filter based on those states. And I'm able to highlight over data points and have them show me some data. And for here, for example, tribal affiliation, I get what's called a tooltip that pops up. And the reason I'm telling you this is because you'll have access to these Tableau dashboards after our presentation. So something that you all can come and sort of, you know, play around with and view. So I'd like to give you just a few pointers on Tableau. One, like I said, is if you can't see, you know, all of these don't even have names in them. But if you highlight over them, you can see the name of the tribe and the percentage. Right, and so this, for example, is all of the sort of tribes that are involved in our data set. And as I mentioned, I can, you know, come and actually filter this by state and move this data around a little bit. And that's something to sort of keep in mind. So for example, if I choose Idaho there, some of this data will update and you can see tribe changes significantly, right, based on the state. So just a way to sort of view that data. But this gives you an example of some of the data we have for demographics. And so we're looking at $26,000 median household income, 40 is a median age, again, of applicants into programs for Otis. Around 72% of folks are American Indian. You see that breakdown of tribe there as well. This percentage stays fairly similar for almost all of our native CDFIs as we filter out for it. Levels of education, right? So you see a good chunk of folks, about a third are high school, about almost another third are some college, and then you see kind of another little distribution of folks in sort of higher education, associates, bachelors, advanced degrees, and about 10% with GEDs. Employment status generally here, you can see that, and this is a multi-select option, so you can be regularly employed and self-employed, for example. So we're looking at about 27% of applicants say that they're unemployed when they apply. And then another about 70% say that they are employed in regular employment. And then finally we have our gender wheel there as well, about 62% female there and 38% male. So this gives you a little bit of a rundown of some of the demographics. One of the nice things moving forward with Otis would be the idea that we can actually look at some of the data we'll see further on by these demographics. So if you wanted to know by age, if the answers differ, if data differs, if impact differs, by tribe, by race or ethnicity, all of those things can eventually be looked at in more detail by demographics. So that's one reason why we like to highlight demographics here, is to think about that for future work in this area. All right, the next dashboard we're going to look at is called Wealth Creation. Again, this is the first of the 5 of the data sets that are specific to some of that Otis impact data that we collect. And so every dashboard that we show will have this state filter. And so you're able to select a series of states or one state to be able to sort of view this data and see how it looks different sort of by region to some degree. But this dashboard, we're not going to do that. We don't necessarily have time to run through and filter it and show you every region, but this gives you a sense of what you can do later on. So this dashboard is, again, talking about wealth creation. So here we're looking at credit scores, we're looking at home wealth creation and business wealth creation. Those are kind of our core categories around wealth. And like I mentioned, there's a lot more data we could pull in here, but these are kind of our core areas. So we're looking at median credit score, the average credit score increase right now. So we're looking at 22 points on average from 2019 data for credit score increase. Average credit score, or median credit score of 598. And those are from actual hard and soft polls from staff. That's not self-reported credit score. The describe your credit score is a self-reported. So this is just from the applicant's perspective, how they generally feel that their credit is. We're looking at some home wealth creation. So we have in Otis recorded 17 home purchase or new construction loans that were applied for, and 20 rehab loans. And for those home purchases, we're looking at 2.4 million requested in loan volume, and then 735,000 for those rehabs. And then similarly on the business wealth creation side, we've got those 2 categories, existing businesses and startup businesses. And so for those existing businesses, we're looking at 9 and about $1 million requested, and then 9 startups as well, with $912,000 requested. The final piece here on our wealth creation is just talking about first-time home buyer status. So these are for those folks who are applying for a home loan, that 54% of them said that they were a first-time home buyer as well. So some pretty cool data there, and that's giving us a sense of where our folks and communities are at when they're applying for products from these Otis groups. And I'll pass it back to Alyssa here real quick to talk about individual empowerment.
Great. So the data related to individual empowerment is really about us seeing the positive impacts towards financially secure and confident clients who don't rely on predatory loans, who rely less on tribal and federal governments, and ultimately are just becoming more bankable, really. So looking at this dashboard, we take a look at those who in the past year have utilized predatory loans. A little over half have not, which is great. And of course, with more follow-up data, hopefully we'll be able to see even more impact on that utilization once coming into contact with a native CDFI. We also look at those clients who have applied for loans in the past year and whether they've been approved or not. About 72.4% of clients in 2019, they had applied for a loan in the past year. And a good deal of those actually were approved for that loan. It's important to point out that a little over half of those who applied for and received a loan did so through that native CDFI, which is really cool to see those repeat clients that are, maybe first getting a loan for debt consolidation or a credit repair loan, and then being able to work with you and coming back for that home improvement loan or maybe even that small business loan. So really neat to see those repeat clients that clearly very much trust native CDFIs and are really able to increase their own, financial stability through those services. In individual empowerment, we also take a look at clients with a checking and or savings account. This shows over half of clients do have these bank accounts. And really, this is, again, just a very small subset of data that we could pull related to individual empowerment. But the story we can tell from this is really about decreasing this use of predatory lending and really just empowering individuals who interact with native CDFIs. And this dashboard really leads us well into the next impact goal, which is sovereignty.
Great, thanks, Alyssa. So the sovereignty dashboard is looking a little bit more at that sort of economic sufficiency and sustainabilities of communities. And so we're looking at sustainable business, fair and equitable employment, and food sovereignty and access to healthy food. So a lot of this is going to be geared more towards those business lenders and looking at sort of what activities they're doing. And the data that we have highlighted here is looking at a total of 54 business loan applicants from Otis members. Of those loan applicants, they provide 52 FTE jobs. These are full-time equivalent jobs provided by these business loan applicants at the time of application. And so, of course, as Alyssa mentioned too, around follow-up, it's kind of our dream with Otis, and I'll talk about it in the conclusion, to start to look at this change over time and look at follow-up, right? So we're able to get that sort of job growth over time, business expansion over time as well. But we know that we've got, sort of 54 business loan applicants here. Of those applicants, we see a decent amount in various stages of business development. So about 40% of those applicants are in that sort of startup category. Really then the remaining 60% are in some sort of expansion phase, varying from growth to sort of an established business expansion focus, as well as mature. And so this is something that is interesting to know and look at in terms of the demographic of businesses that are applying for business loans. We're also seeing some data around profit and revenue. So we're looking at about $52,000 median profit and $200,000 of median revenue. And then for all of those 54 applicants who answered the question, we're seeing a total profit of $405,000 and total revenues about $5.7 million. So just, again, a little bit of data here. What, of course, spurs for me is thinking about, looking at this in comparison, say, to, states or regions generally, to see how this sort of compares to other populations, as well as being able to look at this over time, right? To say, after working with the CDFI, are we able to see increases or changes in profit and revenue, for example? We also include here the primary business loan applicant industry. So this is from NAICS codes, and this is where we're getting that sort of distribution here. So we're seeing a decent amount of folks in transportation and warehousing, so about 20% in construction, retail, trade, other services. So again, dependent on a little bit on each CDFI and what they're sort of focusing on in terms of what industries are sort of represented in those communities. This one is a pretty interesting dashboard to look at by region as well, to sort of see how these industries shift by region. But gives you a little bit of sense of what types of businesses are getting loans and getting services from native CDFIs. And the final piece that we have here is benefits provided to employees. So this is something that a lot of CDFIs are working towards learning more about, is, say, to some degree, quality jobs. right? So looking at the degree to which these businesses are able to provide health insurance, vision and dental insurance, paid time off, retirement, parental leave, and other benefits. And you can see here for each of these pie charts that the sort of bright yellow is no, the gray is yet, or in progress, sorry, and then the red is yes. And if you, like I mentioned, highlight over the pie chart sections, you can see the actual percentage. The main gist here, though, is that the bulk of folks are not able to provide benefits at this point. Makes sense with a lot of startups. You know, I know as a small company myself, this is something that we've just recently been able to offer all of these things. It's not something that is easy to do out the gate, right? So definitely sort of plays into what we're seeing above that. We're seeing a good amount of startups, folks with maybe sort of less profit and revenues to work with, things of that nature. And as mentioned, with all the dashboards, this is the tip of the iceberg in terms of some of the business data that we have, but gives us a little bit of cool information and data there. Great, I'm going to shift over here to our second to last dashboard here, which is whole person wellness. And so this is actually a big section of what we track in Otis that we feel is a bit more specific to native CDFIs and was really driven more by that work that Awista really initiated and worked on at the beginning of the development of Otis, is to say, what are some of those things that we really feel like we're impacting and able to change for our native CDFI clients? And this whole person wellness dashboard focuses on some of those things. So we have sort of financial well-being and personal well-being is the sort of core categories that we talk about here. But first we highlight this budget and spending plan or financial plan. So we're looking about 60% of households who have applied for programs have a budget or spending plan. We're looking at folks, you know, being fairly confident in their ability to achieve a financial goal. You know, again, only 3.9% saying that they're not at all confident that they can meet a financial goal they set for themselves. If they had unexpected expenses, if they can meet that need, we're looking at, you know, about a little over a third are very confident, another 50% are somewhat, and the remaining are not confident. So this, and again, there's actually a lot of data on these are sort of industry-wide in the CDFI world of data that's being collected. So again, the data geek in me wants to then compare this out to the sort of wider populations to see how things look potentially different in native communities. But even without that, it gives a pretty good sense here of how folks are feeling about their financial security. Few more questions around that folks sort of agree or disagree on the statement of I'm securing my financial future. So, you know, a little over half either strongly agree or agree that they are securing their financial future. And then we're seeing about a third who neither agree or disagree, feel a little wishy-washy on it. And then the remaining either disagree or strongly disagree. So some room there that, you know, native CDFIs are definitely providing those services. And again, another one that would be really awesome to see follow-up on, say after these folks receive a loan, how does that change? How do we see improvement in these areas with the work that's being done by native CDFIs? And especially even as mentioned yesterday, I know Lakota mentioned, you know, supporting the work around doing development services. And this is where this data is going to start to show us some of the impact of that. Is that the work being done in development services and training and technical assistance in the end is likely what's going to be shifting this data over time. We have a few here that are, again, a little bit more driven and described by the industry. So I share financial knowledge with family and other community members. The idea here is passing financial knowledge down to the next generation or sharing it up to older generations as well. Same scaling here. So the green is strongly agree. This gray is agree. So still we've got almost 60% who feel like they're doing this and that they regularly share their knowledge. And so we're hopefully seeing a little bit of that passed down into future generations. We have some questions here about spending habits. Again, these are kind of industry standards that are asked as well, but spending more than income, about equal to income, and less than their total income. So we're seeing almost a quarter of folks are overspending. And then maybe even, roughly almost half of folks are really spending equal to income. So the ability to generate savings at either one of these levels is pretty difficult. So thinking about that, right, is, you know, linking that with the budget question and making sure that folks understand the sort of overlap there and being able to hopefully start to get people feeling more secure. Participating in community events, again, another one that we see happening in a lot in Native communities, right, is sort of giving back and participating in your community. That shows community pride. It actually overlaps a little bit into thinking about out-migration reduction, things of that nature that Native CDFIs are working on. So regularly participating in community events. We see a decent amount of folks here agreeing or strongly agreeing, you know, about 50% or so. You know, a good chunk of folks, a third, about sitting in the middle there with neither disagree nor agree. This might not be something that Native CDFIs are directly impacting, but we see some trickle down as folks become happier in their communities and more financially stable, they're able to participate more in community events, is some of the argument there. And then the final two here are really some of that, more of that giving back, right? So we're asking people if they're donating time or if they're lending or giving money to friends and family, if they're donating to, you know, organizations, charitable organizations, if they're mentoring other community members, donating professional goods or services, and the sort of percentage of which folks are doing those. So we're not seeing a ton of participation in these categories. Again, you know, almost 25% on that donations of time and lending to friends and family. But you all, you know, working on the ground know that this is something that, you know, happens a lot. We see it a lot being built into budgets, even to be able to, you know, give back to the community. So it's something that we like to see and sort of track over time. And then finally, the sort of on the business side here, it's in whole person wellness, but the idea here is for these business participants, what are they doing to give back to their community? So donating and volunteering time to events or other businesses, being mentored, subcontracting, donating products and services, donating money, and participating in business networks. So some of those different things here that we do have, you know, pretty big other business participation category there. And that's something that, you know, down the line, we would definitely look into in more depth to say what's happening in this other category, but a little bit of participation on these levels as well. Then I'll pass it back to Alyssa here for the final dashboard.
Hey, we had a question come up that I think would be good to address now. Paula asked, you mentioned measurements being industry standards. What were those benchmarks when we talked about whole person wellness?
Yep, definitely. I'm actually just gonna jump back to that whole person wellness real quick to
I wanted to catch you before you
yep,
went too
thanks.
far from it.
So some of those that are industry standards, so they're asked on a lot of different sort of financial, and it's not just one entity at this point, actually, like a lot of different, especially like counseling groups, when you're doing sort of TA sessions, or suggest asking these standards. So one of them, sort of actually these first three are all part of that data set. You know, household have a budget, spending plan, confidence in meeting a financial goal, unexpected expenses. All three of those are comparable to outside data sets, securing financial future, and then describing your spending. So those are the ones that are comparable to outside data sets that we haven't done anything with yet, but are excited to look into more.
And in the financial capability space, there's two major kind of data sets that you regularly compare to. I think one was out of the University of Wisconsin, and then the other one is actually from Center for the CFPB. Came up with a bunch of kind of like some financial security questions that they now gather annually. And so those were the specific data sets that those are coming from that we pulled. So it could look analogously from Native CDFI participants to those broader populations are from those two specific places.
Thanks, Crystal.
Mm-hmm.
All right, sorry, jump back here to My final one, seventh generation. If I can find it now. There we go.
Okay, so this last one here, we are just really excited about this one. You know, seventh generation transformation, just like all of these impact goals, really is really, really big. So, you know, how do we break that down? So seventh generation transformation in the data that we collect around this really kind of takes a holistic approach to community development. And we kind of look at this in three primary categories. Basically community connectedness and a sense of belonging and pride, you know, offshooting the whole person wellness dashboard that Andrea just went through. We also really look at financial goal setting and skills development. And then housing stability and affordability is a really, really big one for this too. When we think of seventh generation, I know we typically all think of youth and young adults, but for this particular data set, it was really important for us to include all age groups, because when you have a healthy community, the youth of this generation and the next, you know, after that is going to feel that as well. So in this dashboard, you are able to filter this dashboard by this age distribution chart here. So if you click on any of those columns, you can actually filter all of the data here by, you know, youth and young adults or elders or whatever age group you want to look at. And then, of course, Andrea has mentioned this, but just to throw it out again, we'll be providing all of these links to these dashboards to you all. So if you want to, you know, play around with this on your own time, you can definitely do that. I think for this example, I do want to look at that younger adults category, that 18 to 29. So for the sake of this, we'll just filter it. And like I mentioned, housing stability and affordability, and really just even housing goals is a really big thing to look at here. So by filtering this by the youth and young adults, we're now seeing data related to current housing situation and what people would like to change about that housing situation. So first is this current housing situation, and we see from the ages 18 to 29, we've got a little over half that are currently renting. A small bit, 13.7%, own their home. A little over 23% are living at another person's home and not paying rent. There's 2% that are currently homeless, and there's a little over 8% that identified with some other category for their housing situation. This chart here also acts as a filter, which is really, really cool. So not only can we look at the age group filter, but now I can see from 18 to 29 for those who are currently renting, what would they like to change about their current housing situation? So we can really kind of dig deeper into this data and understand how people of an age group would like to change their situation. And when we go back to filtering it by rent, by I'm currently renting, we can see a good deal, 70% their goal is to own a home. So that's a really cool thing there. There's about 16% that want to continue renting. That change there is probably they would want to rent somewhere differently. And then a small percent would like to improve or rehabilitate their home. And then a small 10% that are some other goal in mind. So we thought it was really important to address the health of the community in the sense of housing opportunity and stability, because if there are housing opportunities in an area, you know, that absolutely would decrease the amount of people that leave. I know most people want to leave to go off to school, and then, you know, their dream is to come back. But with a lack of housing that is affordable, or a lack of housing that is, you know, effective for their family, that can be really difficult. So that is what we chose to highlight in this one. And then at the bottom, we have that I am proud to belong to my community. And we can see that there's a good deal of people, 35.5%, that strongly agree, and they definitely are proud to belong to their community. 29% agree. So, you know, with that, over half are feeling that sense of pride in their community. And then I live in stable housing that is affordable. We see the same colors represent the same value. So there is a small percent there that disagree, just 6%. So again, feel free to utilize this one, especially since it's a little bit more interactive than the other dashboards. I definitely recommend going into this one and kind of playing around with the filters. It's pretty neat. And with that, I will pass it back off to Andrea to wrap us up.
Great, thank you, Alyssa. We'd like to, like I said, spend some time at the end to allow folks to sort of give us some feedback and questions. I know it's a lot to digest at once, so definitely something, like I said, that we'll be giving out to everyone. So that's why I have here on this slide the links to all the different dashboards, our contact information as well, because we would definitely love for folks to try to spend some time with some of the data and give us some feedback. But sort of in conclusion here, what we'd like to mention is, you know, really after, 3 years of, folks using Otis and getting that data in there, and it's not been easy all the time, but it's been something that we're at the point now where we've got 3 years of data, and we're really starting to see some of this story emerge. It's the first time we've been able to put together a dashboard that has this much data, and to give you a sense here, we're looking at thousands of applications that we're looking at, thousands. So it's something that is a pretty huge data set, and really, really thankful for all of the Otis groups that have put so much time and effort into getting their systems running and working, and really sticking with us throughout the some of the bumps in the road. There will be more, I'm sure, but we're really excited about the data that we have. Even in this coming year, this year we've got 5 groups in the pipeline on Otis, and we've got 3 sort of newer groups to the system whose data wasn't included because they were sort of new to the system since January, so didn't have a bunch in there yet. So looking towards next year, even really excited about some of the power that we'll hopefully have in some of this aggregate reporting with Otis. We're also, we've mentioned it throughout, but really excited about thinking about follow-up data to be able to show that change over time, as well as just the longevity of the data being collected, being able to look at 2018 to 2019 to 2020 in terms of trends that we're seeing with data sets. That's something that we're also really excited about, that we think is going to be a valuable contribution to the industry and having that sort of trend over time. As always, data collection and reporting is an iterative and responsive process. So the data that we collect in Otis, allows those individual agencies and the industry really to be more responsive by having up-to-date data that's specifically about the people in your communities, in your pipeline, and those you serve. It's giving us a sense of the results of the work that you all are doing. And it allows actually, individual native CDFIs to respond to agency level data. We've seen a lot of folks, shift the way that they're doing programming or add new products based on what they're seeing in some of their data sets. And then also like being able to share it in avenues like this to the industry as a wider group to say, what is this data telling us? What does it look like? It's always something that, of course, I really would have loved to have this in person so we could have more sort of breakout groups and get that direct feedback from folks at some of the valuable points of data. Is I can tell a story with it, but until you contextualize it in sort of individual and in a native CDFI experience, where you're getting a one-sided view to some degree of this data from the researcher perspective. And of course, with that, there's always ways to improve it, right? The more data we have, the better it becomes. We're constantly updating things. The industry shifts and changes the metrics that we want to collect, the things that are required, say, from the CDFI fund, things that OFN is asking for. There's lots of sort of shifts in the data that we collect. And so with that, we're always trying to do the best we can to, move with those changes and provide the data that's necessary for all the different types of reporting and information that Native CDFIs are wanting to put out there. And I mentioned this too, that there's a lot of different ways we can look at this data that we have. This is very sort of, high level, what we call descriptive, right? It's giving you the direct answer to the survey question. And we have those filters in there, especially in that last dashboard where you can really start to see some of that drill down. But there's a lot more we can do with this data, it just takes time, which I wish we had all the time in the world, but we don't. So we try to prioritize certain things. And then, of course, just wanting to really say that our goal in the coming years is to continue to collect and refine the data that we have. There's a lot of work we can do with the current Otis members to get things as most accurate as possible, and then work with any future groups to continue that process as well. And one little sort of piece here to mention for those of you who are Otis members, this is the first time that folks are seeing this. They all gave permission to be involved with this, but this is the first time that they're seeing it live as well. But I wanted to let you all know that we are planning to have individual conversations with every single Otis agency and provide this data to you on an agency level so that you are seeing that as well. So just know that you're going to be having those individual calls with us soon. And I did have a question pop up here that I was going to answer live. We do have an impact measurement framework. There is one that I don't want to go into a crazy amount of depth, but that was the sort of impact goals that we shared at the beginning. And we do actually have this in a publication that we put out earlier this year. It's called Best Practices in Impact Tracking. It's available on the Otis website, which is at owista.org/Otis. It's available there, and actually that impact matrix, as we call it, is included in that report. And I'm more than happy to discuss that impact measurement framework as well in further depth, but if you want to sort of view it and get some more information, it's in that publication on the website. But really here, I just want to sort of conclude with, the links to the dashboard, our contact information, and we've got, a little less than 10 minutes, 8 minutes here to answer any further questions. And I don't know if Owista has anything they want to ask of us as well. That would be fine as well, but just in case anyone has questions, thank you all so much.
I just wanted to, I did put in the link here to where you can find that publication. Please use it. We spent so long writing it, Andrea and I and the rest of our team. And it is, in whether or not you are going, on Otis or want to be on Otis, what it does do is it lays out, so for example, whatever system you want to be on, it lays out under this framework, what would the impact indicator look like? That would help you gauge these things under that. And so anyway, all that to say, it goes through and walks you through all of those different ways that you could be tracking this and gives you some recommendations around that. It also shares some good case studies of our CDFIs who have been working in this space to try to improve their impact. Yeah, see, look at that, she's showing it. But yes, you can see the indicators, how you would even ask this question, how often would you ask this question, just as a tool as you're thinking through your impact system. I will say we've learned a lot, and that's what the first part of the paper is on, is about all the things we've learned while trying to implement it. And those include things like better to ask less questions regularly than to intermittently ask lots of questions, right? So it includes all of kind of the learnings we've had as we've tried to help groups implement too here. So, but anyway, I did put that in the chat column for you all. Are there other questions for Andrea? We still have a little bit of time.
I see Diana has her hand raised, so I can unmute. Did you have a question, Diana? Okay. I guess not.
Looks like Janelle was asking if the dashboards will be updated as more data comes in, and yes, definitely. That's something that, again, actually Capital Access gives us a perfect platform to be able to sort of share this data out annually. So at minimum annually, that we'll be planning to sort of put out more information and sort of add to these, update data, sort of have that conversation regularly. I think it's important that folks have access to data, and of course Otis groups have a little bit more responsiveness as well, that we could certainly do more specific things and more regularly than every year for different reporting. But generally speaking, for something this widespread, it would be annually. We'll definitely be updating them.
So thank you, everyone, and a special thanks to Andrea and Alyssa. This was a great session and extremely informative. So we appreciate you, and thank you for doing this for us. And we are going to go on a 15-minute break right now, and we will be back at 1:45 for our next session, Building Our Economy Post-COVID-19. Thank you.